and welcome to the Post-COVID Church. What now? The mission, energizing Christians to engage the lost and hurting in your community. Here's your host, Stuart Kellogg, author of the Post-COVID Church.
But elections can't solve the problem we've got. The problem we've got is that our culture has been decaying from inside for 30 or 40 years.
That's Chuck Colson, founder of Prison Fellowship and the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, giving his last message just minutes before collapsing. Thank you for joining. Chuck Colson gave his life to helping Christians become better equipped to engage a rapidly changing culture, a culture he would not be surprised 10 years after his death to be more hostile to the faith and more intent on pushing biblically based behavior and thought out of the mainstream. I had the privilege of studying under Chuck Colson as part of what's now called the Colson Fellows Program. The three guests today are all lay leaders from across the country who not only have solid theological grounding, but also extensive training on how to effectively engage the culture, something missing from far too many churches. You'll learn a lot. Jeff Goen has lived in Green Bay, Wisconsin for more than 30 years. He's a former business owner. The pandemic drove home a big reality.
Well, I learned that we have a great adversary prowling around, ready to take us down. And I learned that our church was, probably taking some things for granted, as far as in-reach, outreach. And, the pandemic years really forced us to be introspective and find ways to make this work. We have a great commission. We're supposed to be making disciples of all nations. And it really was a wake-up call for us. We handled it well. We're stronger on the back end of it, but it was scary. It was a frightening time, but we got through it.
Jeff saw that Redeemer Lutheran Church had a plan on how to stay connected so that the body of Christ would not be overwhelmed.
We tried to meet the needs of our members and of the community very quickly. We dove right in. For those that couldn't come in, we actually put a short-range FM broadcaster, and we broadcast the service to the parking lot. We also implemented drive-up communion. It's not like it sounds. Families would drive into our carport, and one family at a time would get out, come into the narthex, do confession and absolution, and then receive Holy Communion. We expanded our live stream capabilities. Our pastor started a daily devotional. That's about 10 or 15 minutes, noon, Monday through Thursday. That is live streamed. And it continues to this day, and it will continue to be broadcast. It's available on demand. We get it's amazing the amount of views that we get. Scripture tells us that all things work for good to those that love God and are called according to His purpose. And what the pandemic did is it made our media reach grow about 10 times pre-pandemic levels. That's a good thing. And some of our on-demand broadcasts have reached thousands of people, some from Latin America, Africa, the Middle East. There were a couple that really went viral, especially in the Middle East, and I really found that interesting. I never would have dreamed of such a broad reach from a relatively small church in Green Bay, Wisconsin.
One of the saddest sights in the midst of the shutdown, churches that literally split during the pandemic, not because of interpreting scripture or anything biblical, but on whether mass should be required. Jeff Weir is a former Army infantryman and then a Navy chaplain, moving up to a regional chief of chaplains for the VA. Jeff's an experienced leader. He said the staff at Crosspoint, his Round Rock, Texas church, handled the issue well.
We're not a big church. We're about in the 100, 150 range. COVID has caused, and our staff handled this well, has caused some tension between those who, some are still wearing masks to church, and most aren't. And they did a really good job of making everybody feel welcome and letting people come as they desired. And of course, none of us have gone off on anybody, at least not that I know of. I certainly haven't, but I don't see any tension in the church about that at all. So those are some things we're anxious to do some more outreach too.
This allowed the members to focus on that outreach. When handled in a Christ-like manner, these potential contentious issues can open up eyes. That's what Connie Satzler saw in her Manhattan, Kansas church, Grace Baptist.
I did learn that not everyone thinks the same. And that was kind of challenging to navigate. I think my church did a good job. And one thing that was kind of unique about our church is one of our pastors has a medically fragile child. And to protect that child, this family, before the pandemic ever came along, they pretty much just hibernated and did not go out at all, did not see people during the winter, because if Chloe would get flu or cold, that she could die from that. So I think our church family saw, what was necessary to protect this family. So most people were amenable to good or basic public health practices, but there were some differences of opinion, on how open you should be or how many of those practices that you should adopt. And I think I was kind of surprised at the variety of opinions there, and how in practice it is quite hard to navigate when you're trying to implement, when you're implementing policy on a church level. There are some real challenges to that, and there needs to be a lot of grace.
The members also understood the need to change, something that during the last 25 years, Connie has helped public agencies and nonprofits navigate through her consulting work.
I think I've noticed just some practical things that have stayed, like learning how to do online church business meetings, how to take votes and how to do that. And then when we started going back, we did, even hybrid. So that's one of the things that has stayed, is having that hybrid option to our church business meetings and be able to vote. And we do still have it. We've gone back to, we're pretty much in person, but there are still like virtual or hybrid options for some things. So I think we've just kind of figured that out.
Jeff Goen, Jeff Weir, and Connie Satzler are all commissioned fellows with the Colson Center for Christian Worldview, a program that focuses on equipping Christians to do more than believe the right things, but to also live as Christ demands, which means influencing the culture.
So how do you fix the culture? Culture is actually formed by the belief system of the people, by the cult, which is us, the church, has been historically. So if things are bad, don't think it's going to be solved by an election. It's going to be solved by us.
Chuck Colson, literally, up to his last breath, taught that the church must think more and better. He collapsed right after this message, dying just a few weeks later. Colson was transformed by Christ. From President Nixon's hatchet man to his post-prison establishment of prison fellowship, bringing the word and changing lives behind bars around the world. Colson realized, however, that unless the church stressed the Christian worldview, those prisons would just keep filling up.
So it comes right back to us. Look in the mirror. That's where the problem is. And if we can, through the church, renew the church to really bring a healthy cultural influence, then there's some hope that we can be changed.
As Chuck Colson put it, Christianity is more than a relationship with Jesus. It is more than discipleship. It is a way of seeing and comprehending all reality. During this last message, he reinforced the importance of making sure Christians look at every aspect of life through the lens of biblically based truth.
This is a moment when the time is right for a movement of God's people to begin to impact the culture we live in. Desperately needed. This is why I've been spending so much time in recent years teaching biblical worldview, because I think that's at the root of our problems. And once we can get that understood by the church, that it is a worldview, and we have to live it and express it and contend for it. Otherwise, it's not going to be there. We're the ones that are the custodians of that.
It's never been more important to understand the Christian worldview and apply it. A good example. During the shutdown, as school children were forced to Zoom learning, what was being taught in public schools about race and sex was no longer in the shadows. This led to a political and social upheaval that continues. For example, the 2021 Virginia governor's race tipped to the Republican because of the incumbent's resistance to parental input on the school's curriculum. Jeff Weir in Texas says it's not enough to just complain.
People start understanding kind of what's going on in education that they hadn't seen before. And I'm thinking particularly of the transgender thing and some of the critical theory things that, of course, people deny that it's being taught, but it's not being taught. It's being put in the milk or something. It seems to me. What I'm concerned, one thing I'm concerned with that is just that the churches develop a proper response. And of course, that's one of the things that Colson Fellows does, is we're trying to get people up to speed on our cultural moment, and then have them develop a plan of how they in their own lives could develop a plan of how they can approach the culture in some way with their own giftedness and their own resources. So I think that's something I wish churches would pay more attention to. How are they going to disciple their people? Let me put it that way, to have a good biblical response to all these things going on. I would like to see the churches take on this, and I think that's what one of the things Colson's trying to do is help the churches take on this training of how are we going to respond in this cultural moment. And perhaps we've coasted for years, on Billy Graham, so to speak. And that's not a negative, but he was so influential. But we're kind of in a brave new world.
Jeff Goen in Green Bay says it's critical that pastors and staff be equipped to deal with this cultural challenge.
Well, I think, for the church to be relevant, we have to have relevant Christians making up the church, relevant believers that aren't afraid of, I don't want to say confronting culture, but just answering culture. There is truth out there. There's the truth of Scripture. And thankfully, thank God, we have a pastor that is not afraid to preach it. I admit at times he can be a bull in a china shop, but he's our bull and this is our china shop, and I'm an elder at the church and we try to rein him in from time to time. When we get afraid of the culture is when we fail as Christians. And I kind of, when I retired, or even before I retired, I kind of blocked out the culture and I got away from news, and I didn't really want to hear it because it was really brings you down. But after I retired, and then especially with the Colson Fellows program, and again, this isn't an advertisement for them or not, but it really got me back into it. And that's a good thing because I'm aware of what's going on. To be aware of something, you have to be aware of what they're doing. You have to be aware of what those worldviews are. And that's what we have to do as Christians. We have to be 24/7 Christians, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, not 1 Christians, not 1 hour a day, 1 day a week. It's something that we really have to embrace because there is no answer for this culture outside of Christianity. Yeah. And that's what we have to show them that by living Christ-like lives and fulfilling the Great Commission, teaching them. And that's where we're falling short.
Connie Satzler lived through the best illustration of the difficulty the church faces, persuading more than half the Americans who favor legalized abortion.
Kansas had a big amendment vote. We were surprised at the loss, although I could tell kind of leading up to it, maybe it wasn't going very well. And I think that we didn't do a very good job of articulating the case for life. I don't think I personally did, even though it's an issue that I care deeply about. It's just really hard to navigate that when you're in the middle of it. And what was interesting, like the arguments that were difficult to counter for those that opposed that amendment really dealt with like exceptions, and even they were kind of about life. It was all about the fear of a pregnant woman, having a miscarriage and that being misclassified as an abortion. So it was interesting to me that really the arguments they were using were ones that affirmed life and a fear of not respecting life in some way. It's really black and white, but they didn't make it black and white, and they were really effective in that. And I don't think we did a very good job of articulating it. And there was a little bit of a split among the pro-life community, those that just wanted like an all or nothing. They didn't feel like it went far enough. So yeah, I think it's something that we need to talk about in the church and make sure we're kind of on the same page about, and we need to hash out and figure out where we are and how we want to stand, because we weren't prepared in Kansas.
Can you effectively explain and share the Christian worldview when it comes to these difficult issues? It's hard and takes work. Jeff Weir in Texas leads a cohort of students learning to do just that.
I'm reading through Martin Luther King's letter from a Birmingham jail. And, I think there's some modeling in there. He talks about justice and injustice very clearly. I love the demonstrations they put on, the peaceful demonstrations, being willing to take a hit if somebody hits you. And I also admire the cross section of the different Black denominations and groups that came together for that. And that's something to think about, how we as Christians can come together on these issues in a loving and generous manner, but also very firmly.
Connie leads the Colson Central Time Zone online cohort.
You need to be able to respond with that biblical perspective to what's happening in this cultural moment. And I think sometimes people come into the program feeling discouraged, like the culture and this world feels really overwhelming, and I don't know what to do in response to this. But I think it does equip them. So what's really encouraging is that most often students come away saying, I feel equipped. I feel like I am ready to stand in the middle of this cultural moment, in this time and place where God put me, and respond to where I am, whether that is things that I'm hearing from my grandchildren or children, or things that I'm hearing in my workplace or in my church. I would encourage people to check out the Colson Fellows program, so they can go to colsonfellows.org. It's a 10-month program that's a deep dive into Christian worldview, and you're doing it within a cohort. There are a number of cohort options available online, in person, in most of the major metro areas in the country. There's a pastor's cohort. There are some church affiliates around the country. So you're digging into resources, books, articles, webinars, with a group where you can talk about these things. You can discuss them. You can share how you're going to walk through a scenario or respond to a situation. And people come away saying they feel equipped, where before they maybe felt fearful or overwhelmed. They come away with some excitement about being able to live and respond in this cultural moment and really live for Christ.
It's easy to get more information about the Colson Center for Christian Worldview. www.colsoncenter.org. Even if you can't commit to a course such as Colson's, every Christian has to be better equipped to understand the Christian worldview and how to engage this increasingly hostile culture. Whether through books, podcasts, there are even plenty of YouTube videos available. Thanks to Connie Satzler, Jeff Goen, and Jeff Weir for sharing with us. I do pray this podcast included helpful insights, because the mission is energizing Christians to engage the lost and hurting in your community. I'd also like you to check out my book. It too will be a help. The Post-COVID Church, an action plan to thrive, not just survive. It's available in paperback and ebook at Amazon.com. I'm Stuart Kellogg. I'd love to hear from you. It's easy. Just write Stuart, S-T-U-A-R-T, Stuart at thepostcovidchurch.org. Thanks again for listening.
Thank you for taking the time to listen to the Post-COVID Church, What Now? With your host, Stuart Kellogg. For more information, visit thepostcovidchurch.com. And you're invited to join the Post-COVID Church Facebook group. Please share the Post-COVID Church podcast with your friends.